What do you do when, if you loved me, you'd let me sleep with others, becomes a public test of your dignity? How does a quiet husband answer a loud demand, without shouting, threats, or games? Can calm preparation outlast the noise long enough for a single signature to end the performance? Before we dive deeper into the story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Auden Vale, and I am 36, a network technician who fixes small problems while larger ones pretend to be ideas. She said love should feel like open windows. I said I needed honesty I could trust. I kept my tone low and tidy, the way I keep our drawers. I placed 2 mugs on opposite counters and watched the space between them become a habit. I wrote the date in a plain spreadsheet and added a short line that said kitchen, morning, request for freedom. I told myself I was calm because calm helps a father think. Our daughter Iris asked if I would read tonight, and I said I would try. A calendar reminder blinked on my phone, Riverfront 2:15 p.m., and I swiped it away. I slid a thin binder labeled utilities back under the fruit bowl and let it sit thicker than bills. The guest bed looked too neat, like a spare answer waiting for a question. A cloud sync pop-up told me a file had uploaded successfully, and I closed it without reading. She called it growth. I called it a boundary. The printer breathed once and fed a blank page. I saved it the way people save proof they cannot name yet. I woke before the alarm and listened to the old pipes settle in the walls. I made coffee and placed 2 mugs on opposite counters without thinking. The space between them looked like a river I could not cross without getting cold. She came into the kitchen with a bright voice and said love should not be owned. I said I needed rules we both could keep. I kept my tone low so words would not become weapons. I opened my laptop and let a blank spreadsheet sit on the screen until my hands stopped shaking. I typed the date and wrote a short line that said kitchen, morning, open request repeated. I saved the file and watched a small cloud sync pop-up say file uploaded successfully. I closed the notice because the words felt too loud for the quiet room. She scrolled her phone and smiled at something I could not see. I cut fruit for our daughter and set a small bowl by the window. Iris asked if I would read to her tonight. I said I would try, and I meant it. A calendar reminder blinked, Riverfront 2:15 p.m., and I swiped it away before she could ask why it was there. She called the idea a test of trust, and I said I heard her. I folded a dish towel and put it on the oven handle. I opened a thin binder labeled utilities and slid a blank page under the cover to press out the curve, then closed it again. It was thicker than bills should make it, and I let it be. I moved through the hall and looked at the wall planner. A date 2 weeks away was circled in red. I took a picture with my phone and saved it to a quiet folder. In the bedroom, I straightened the guest bed, even though no one had slept there. It felt like setting aside a clean thought I might need later. A muted phone on the dresser lit with the word private, then went dark again. I did not touch it. I taped a small USB stick under the edge of a folder that said taxes, then stood still until I could hear my own breath. I told myself I was not hiding anything. I told myself I was building a shelf that could hold weight. I walked Iris to the door and tied her laces while she leaned on my shoulder. She asked if we were happy. I said we were steady. She nodded in a serious way and said steady sounded like a bridge. She liked bridges. I kissed the top of her head and watched them walk down the hall. The latch clicked and the air shifted in the apartment. I cleaned the counter in small circles. A phone alarm labeled paper drop hummed once, and I turned it off before the second tone. I opened my laptop again and set up 2 folders named Archive A and Archive B on the clean desktop. I put nothing in Archive B. I put a screenshot of the red circle date into Archive A and closed the lid. I changed one contact name to a single emoji. I changed a message thread title to follow up and muted it. I wrote a sticky note that said bring forms and slid it under the desk lamp where the light could hold it still. I breathed in until my chest hurt and then let it go. Work felt like a harbor after a rough road. I sat under the air vent, listened to the low rattle, and let it carry the extra noise away. I answered tickets with short, clear sentences. I kept my body still and my face calm. My manager, Ms. Petra Ives, sent a message that said she wanted a quick word about online mentions. I wrote that I would be available after lunch. In the break area, the printer spooled once and fed out a blank page by mistake. I took it and slid it into my notebook. A blank paper made sense to me. It could hold anything and nothing, and both could be useful. On my screen, a tag appeared with my name and the word closed-minded under it. I took a screenshot and saved it to Archive A with the time. I did not write any reply because replies feed fire. I watched the cursor blink in an empty email and then closed the window. After lunch, I walked by the river to clear my head. The water moved in slow patches beneath the stone bridge. A boy on a scooter laughed and nearly fell, then did not fall, and looked brave because of it. My phone buzzed with a text from Rowan, her brother, linking a poll that asked if open love was the only adult way to avoid boredom. I did not open the poll. I saved the link and put the phone away. Clouds shifted. I practiced 3 sentences in my head that would help me later, the way I practice cable paths before pulling them through a wall. Be kind, be honest, be proper. I repeated the words until they felt like rails, not walls. I walked back to the office and finished a report. The day turned toward evening, and I kept my shoulders down. At home, she spoke in the doorway about a live talk on a rooftop bar where friends would discuss modern love without fear. I said I had a report to finish. She said people would see me differently when I embraced growth. I said I would pick up Iris from school tomorrow. She smiled like a person who knows a trick and left with a bright swing in her step. I listened to the elevator groan down. I placed 2 mugs on opposite counters and watched the shape of the space they made. I moved one mug a little farther away, then moved it back. The guest bed was neat. The hallway light put a thin line across the floor. I stood in that line and told myself not to move fast. Door latch clicks. The latch clicked twice and the chain brushed the plate, and I felt my pulse slow as the sound of her steps faded and the printer breathed once behind me without printing anything at all. I did not follow her right away. I sat at the table and opened the spreadsheet. I added another line that said hallway, evening, rooftop talk planned. I moved 3 old bills into a drawer and closed it a little too hard, then locked it, then unlocked it again to make sure it worked, then locked it once more. The lock made a soft click that calmed me. I browsed storage options, delivery tracking, and notary near me, then closed each tab before the results could settle. I wore headphones and called my mother, May, from the hallway. I kept my voice low. She asked if I was safe. I said I was steady. She told me to take notes and drink water. I thanked her and ended the call. I listened to the quiet in the apartment until it felt like a blanket instead of a cage. When I finally went out, I took the stairs. The rooftop bar was all lights and wind and screens. Friends lifted phones and cheered in bright bursts. A chant started near the tables. Someone said, "Let her fly, if you love her." Someone else said, "No more cages." I stood near the rail and looked at the city below, not at the phones above. My phone recorded a minute of ambient sound from my pocket. I did that so my hands would not try to do other things. She came into view, turned sideways to the group, and explained her test of love as if she were teaching a class. Rowan filmed from the corner. Jet leaned near the heaters with a smile that did not reach his eyes. I watched the reflection of the crowd in the window next to me. The reflection made everyone look softer, like ghosts trying to remember themselves. A manager from my office was there with a friend. He turned away when he saw me, and then back again and gave me a small nod. I nodded back because it cost nothing and saved something I could not name. A server brought a tray with a sparkler stuck in a cupcake, and the sparks hissed like a radio without a station. The chant shifted into a toast. Someone said, "Bless her freedom." Someone else said, "If he loves her, he will let her." I kept breathing, long and even. My phone buzzed with an unknown caller and stopped. I put my hands in my pockets and felt the edge of the USB I had brought for no reason except to have something certain. A photo flash popped from the center table. I turned my head away, and the afterimage left a small white square floating where my eyes wanted a horizon. Rowan announced a poll winner and declared that fear was the real cheater. People laughed. I had nothing to add. I stepped away while the cheer rose and fell. I walked down the stairs and out to the street and let the night air wash the heat out of my ears. The next morning, the office felt older than it was. Ms. Ives asked for a quick word in a quiet room with a plant and a small framed photo of a pier. She asked if I was safe and if I wanted to document concerns. I said I was documenting and keeping work separate. She said thank you and asked me to report if any tag crossed into harassment. I said I would. On the way out, the printer near HR spit a blank page and then stopped. I took it and put it with the first one. 2 blanks felt like bookends around a chapter that had not been written yet. At my desk, I saw that a colleague had left a cup of coffee. No note, just warmth. I took a sip and felt my hands return to my wrists. At lunch, I walked past the gym where Jet worked. A poster on the wall said, "Be better than yesterday," and someone had drawn a crown above the words. He laughed with a client by the desk and glanced at me. I kept walking. The parking garage under the office smelled like cold dust and oil. Footsteps behind me paused at the same pace as mine. I did not turn. The steps faded in the other direction, and I let the echo go with them. I set a phone alarm labeled paper drop for late afternoon, then turned it off when it pinged. The action was enough. The sound was not needed. I renamed one contact with an emoji and deleted 3 old messages. I told myself that simple steps can hold a room upright. I believed it for a full minute and then for another. In the evening, I took Iris to the park. The swing squeaked like old hinges. She asked if love meant sharing everything with everyone. I said love meant telling the truth and keeping promises. She looked at the sky as if an answer lived there. She said truth was a better word than sharing. I agreed. A parent on the next bench looked at us, then at a phone, then at us again. I buckled Iris into the car, and she asked if Mommy would read tonight. I said I would read, and she nodded like the answer would keep her safe for one more bedtime. I bought milk and bread at the supermarket. The cashier avoided my eyes and told me the card reader was slow today. I said it was fine. A magazine near the register had a headline about rules and freedom. I looked away because I had a child beside me and dinner to make. Back home, I set 2 mugs on opposite counters and started a pot of soup. I slid an unsealed envelope into the outbox and left it there. I moved the thin binder labeled Utilities a few inches to the left and felt its weight with my palm. I opened my laptop and minimized a tab when I heard the door. She came in with quick steps and a bright tone like a bell that did not care how it sounded. She said people were excited for her next talk. I said Iris should not be in any posts without my clear yes. She called that fear. I said it was care. She rolled her eyes and walked down the hall with her phone up like a lantern. I saved the time into the spreadsheet with initials and dates. I put the pot on low and turned off the kitchen light. I stood in the doorway and watched our shadows stretch in 2 directions as the hall lamp hummed. I told myself there would be no shouting. I told myself there would be no show. I told myself I would handle this properly. I said the word properly out loud once to hear how it sounded in our apartment. It sounded plain. I decided to keep it. Manager requests a quick word. My phone buzzed on the table with a calendar ping from work, and the note said Ms. Ives wanted a follow-up, and as I reached for it, a second buzz came from the door, the knob turned, and footsteps paused outside like someone choosing a side, and I watched the knob hold still, and the printer spooled once in the hall without a page, and the room held its breath for what would happen next. I carried a plastic-wrapped gift into the community center hall and kept to the edge where the air was cooler. The room smelled like paper banners and sugary frosting. Long tables ran in bright rows, and someone had taped a sign that said Celebrate Growth over the door. I stood by the stack of paper plates and watched phones move like small fish looking for light. Rowan lifted his arm high so the camera could see more than the people could. He announced that brave love needed witnesses. I let the words float past and fixed my eyes on the corner where the banner's tape was already peeling. Mara entered in a dress that moved when she laughed. She thanked everyone for supporting her journey and said rules could be cages or tools, depending on who holds them. People made that small cheer sound that means agreement and relief. Jet took a place by the wall with 2 cups and the face of a man who expects to be seen. I felt the heat rise in the room like a lid sliding over a pot. Someone tapped a glass with a spoon to call for a circle. The crowd shifted and closed. Rowan stood on a chair and smiled at his phone as if it were a friend. He said love without fear was the theme of the night. He made a joke about permission slips for adult hearts. Laughter swelled. I kept my hands at my sides and breathed in sets of 4 the way I do on ladders at work. A woman I did not know said I should take a bow for being modern. I did not bow. I looked at the banner and counted the letters of the word celebrate until my heart came down a notch. Mara tilted her head toward Jet and listened to something he said in a low tone. She nodded, as if he had confirmed her plan. The cake arrived with sparkler candles that hissed like rain on a hot road. Phones tilted, flashes probed the air, and the chant changed to bless her freedom. I did not answer a question nobody asked me. Rowan invited Mara to share a teaching moment. She stepped forward and explained that she had offered a deal that proved love was real, and that I had not yet passed the test. She said fear wastes years. She said joy never asks for guards. Each line arrived like a polished stone rolled in the hand until smooth. People nodded because smooth things are easy to hold. Someone shouted that I should be brave. I kept my eyes on the window beside them and used the glass to watch them backward. In the reflection, the lights looked softer, and I could breathe again. Iris's drawing from yesterday was still in my pocket, folded small and safe. I touched the paper through the cloth and let its curve remind me of bedtime stories and quiet lamps. A server placed the cake on the center table, and the sparks burned low. The room dimmed for a moment to help the phones catch more light. The cheer leaned into silence to wait for a new peak. I reached into my pocket and felt a single USB stick with today's date on a strip of tape. I did not need it for any task here. I wanted it near me because it was one solid shape with a known purpose. It made me feel like a person carrying a key, even if the door was not marked yet. A tremor of laughter ran through the room as Rowan read the results of a poll he had posted an hour earlier. The options were all slanted toward his idea. He said the crowd had spoken. I thought about crowds and how they borrow certainty like coats at a party. Coats go home later. Certainty does not always go with them. I stepped out into the hallway for air and found the exit to the parking garage. The concrete felt cool and clean. My steps echoed, then changed when a second set matched them for a few beats, and then stopped. I did not turn. The echo faded slowly, as if the listener had lost interest or found what they wanted in a different direction. I took out my phone and opened a small note with initials and times and typed garage, echo, pause, then closed it. A phone alarm labeled paper drop buzzed against my palm. I dismissed it before the second tone. I leaned against the cool rail and let the air settle the heat in my face. When I went back upstairs, the room had shifted into the part of the evening when people eat with one hand and film with the other. Mara laughed into a camera and called the night a lesson. Jet took a step behind her shoulder so he would be in the frame without having to be in the story. I watched 3 seconds, then looked away. Rowan moved through the crowd asking guests to give advice to a husband learning a new shape of love. A woman said kindness without control feels like flight. A man said jealousy is a joke for teenagers. I filed the sounds under theater and let them pass. I stood near Reuben, Myra's uncle, who had arrived late with a face that carried not enough sleep. He asked in a very soft voice if I was eating. I said I was steady. He rubbed a paper napkin between his fingers and said children do better with fewer shows. I thanked him. He nodded and stayed by me for a minute the way a rock stays near a bridge, not to block, but to remind the water that somebody is older than the current. Inside the circle, Rowan asked for a last cheer to seal the night's teaching. The cheer came fast. The sparkler hissed out. The cameras blinked twice. Camera flash. A sharp flash caught my face in the edge of its light, along with Jet's smile and Mara's lifted chin, and my eyes filled with a soft square that stayed even after I turned away. And in that square, a text preview on her phone lit and slid away before she could see it. I left the hall and drove to the gym district to check the poster I had noticed before. The lobby smelled like rubber and a strong citrus cleaner. The same slogan hung under a crown sketch. Be better than yesterday. Jet laughed with 2 clients and looked at the glass as if it were a mirror he approved. I stood outside and counted 3 breaths, then 5, then walked on. I did not take a photo because the meaning was already stored where it needed to be, not as proof, but as context for why words were chosen the way they were later. The sky darkened in firm bands as I crossed the street. I thought about the thin binder labeled utilities at home and the way the plastic cover lifted at the corner. I wanted to fix that corner with heat from a hairdryer and a flat book. I wanted one thing in the house to be flat and sure. The next day I carried Iris to the park after school and let her climb the small ladder to the slide while I stood at the bottom with my arms out. She asked if love meant giving everything anyone asked for. I said love meant telling the truth and keeping promises even when nobody clapped. She said clapping was loud and did not help you sleep. I agreed. A parent on the next bench looked at their phone and then at me and then away. I pretended not to notice. I pushed Iris on the swing and counted aloud to keep the rhythm even. She asked if Mommy would read tonight. I said I would read, and she would listen, and we would both sleep. She smiled and let the air lift the ribbon tied to her backpack. The sun slid to a lower angle and made long shadows that looked like quieter versions of us. We went home by the supermarket and bought milk and cocoa and a small bag of rice because the list in my head liked straight lines. At the checkout, the card machine blinked and stalled, and the cashier said the bank lines were slow today. I said we could wait. Ah! A couple behind me whispered in that way that sounds like breath, and also like words. I kept my eyes on the lane number sign so the moment could get bored and leave. When we stepped outside, the evening light made the parking lot look like it had been varnished. Iris said the ground was shiny like a book cover. I said the shine would fade, and that was fine. We put the groceries in the trunk and drove home without music because the quiet felt like a room we both needed to visit. At home, I arranged 2 mugs on opposite counters again and set the thin binder labeled utilities near the fruit bowl. I lifted it, felt the weight, and set it down. I flipped the mail stack so the envelopes faced down. The unsealed one stayed in the outbox. I opened my laptop, and a CloudSync pop-up said file uploaded successfully. I closed it without checking the file name. I renamed a contact with a single emoji so it would not shout if it appeared on the screen. I opened the clean desktop tree and moved a simple audio note with only a date into Archive B. I set the phone to silent and slid it under the edge of the lamp. The lamp made a small circle of light that did not reach the hallway. I stood at the edge of that circle and waited for the lock to turn. The lock turned and the door opened and Mara came in with energy like static. She said strangers on the internet had taught her more about love in a week than I had in a year. I said Iris would not appear in any of her posts. She said I was proving everyone right about fear. I said I would handle matters properly if the Post kept using our names like toys. She said proper was what people said when they gave up. I stirred the soup and let the smell of onions be the only thing that grew. I put a bowl in front of Iris and another in front of me and a napkin between us. I asked Iris about her sticker from school. She said it said excellent helper and that she had earned it by sorting books. I said I believed the sticker. We ate and then read a story about ships and stars. Iris slept before the third page, and I carried the book to the table and set it down without closing it. On the balcony the night was thin, and the plants moved like paper in a low fan. I could hear the quiet beep of a recording app in the way houses hold sound beyond the wall. I did not try to find it. I let the beep fold back into the air. I looked at the new key on my ring and did not test it in any lock. I kept it because it was there. I said aloud that I would be kind and honest and proper. The 3 words sat in my mouth with a weight that did not hurt. I went inside and stood by the wall planner and looked at the red circled date that had moved closer by doing nothing. Elevator bell. The next morning, as I tightened my tie for work, the elevator bell rang in the hall and a neighbor stepped out with a parcel and my name on the label. And as I reached for it, my laptop minimized mid-edit. Voices passed the door, and the thin smell of printer toner drifted from the hallway like a promise I could not open yet. Iris woke early and asked for pancakes. I made them small, and even so the first one would not burn. She ate with care and saved 1 triangle for later because saving made her feel strong. I packed her backpack and tucked the ribbon into the side pocket. We walked to the car, and she asked if families can change shapes and still be families. I said families can change and still hold. She said hold was the most important part. I agreed and buckled her in. On the way to school, a bus pulled in front of us with an ad for a phone plan that said more is better. I looked at the words and felt a thin ache and then let it pass. I dropped her at the gate and told her I would be at pickup. She touched my hand and ran to the steps without looking back because she trusted the promise. At work, I answered a series of tickets that wanted quick hands and slower words. I kept my replies short and clean. Around mid-morning, a colleague sent a message that said he had seen a rooftop clip and asked if I was okay. I said I was steady. He sent back a thumbs up and then a second message that said coffee, and a hot cup appeared 5 minutes later without any talk. I took the cup and let the heat sit in my palms. On my lunch break, I walked past the office gym again. The poster with the crown looked smudged at the edge like it had been touched too many times. The lobby door opened and Jet laughed with someone about a new class. He saw me and looked at the floor, then at the door frame, then at me, then at himself in the reflection. I kept walking. The parking garage under the tower was cold and dry, and the echo of my steps sounded like a count I could trust. I set a phone alarm labeled paper drop for late afternoon, then turned it off when it hummed. The action was enough. The sound would have been a show. After school, I took Iris to the park again. The swings were all taken, so we walked the path and kicked a pine cone along the edge where the grass met the dirt. She asked if promises are heavy. I said promises are light when kept and heavy when broken. She asked if we could choose lighter. I said we could. We sat on a bench and split the saved pancake triangle. She said it tasted better after waiting. I said many things do. A parent took a photo of their child on the slide, and for a moment I thought the lens aimed at us, but it did not. I breathed out in a way that let my chest drop a notch. On the way home, we stopped for bread. The cashier said nothing and stared at the scanner as if it were trying to teach her patience. As dusk came, I moved through the house and set things down where they belonged. I put the blank pages from the office printer into my notebook like calm boards across a gap. I checked that the USB taped under the taxes folder still held. I placed 2 mugs on opposite counters and left them there without touching. I heard Mara in the hall telling someone that tomorrow would be the day the brand moved forward. I minimized my screen without thinking when she walked past the table. I slid a single audio note into Archive B and watched the progress bar fill without saying what name it carried. I pulled the balcony door open and the plants shook with a breath of cooler air. The cloud sync pop-up appeared and then faded. I stood with my hands on the frame and waited for the evening to make its line across the floor. I spoke once into the still room and said I would handle matters properly. I did not say it loud. I did not say it twice. Iris slept with her hand open on the blanket like she had let go of a rope. I picked up the book from the table and read the last 2 paragraphs to myself and felt my heart match the slow speed of the sentences. Footsteps paused outside the door. The footsteps stopped just beyond the frame. The knob turned a fraction and held. The printer in the hall spooled once and went quiet again, and I stood in the doorway and counted to 4 and knew that tomorrow the room would change shape in public, and I breathed until my face felt like mine. Morning slid in thin and pale, the kind that makes every surface look honest. I set 2 mugs on opposite counters and let the space between them say what I would not say twice. Iris padded in with her socks twisted and asked for the cereal with the small stars. I poured a careful bowl and set the spoon where her hand liked it. She ate with the slow focus of a builder. Mara came through the hallway fast, phone in hand, light bouncing on her face. She said people expected a live session tonight about open love. I said our daughter would not be included in any posts. She said I was proving the point about fear. I said I would handle matters properly. The word sat in the room like a chair. It did not move. She laughed and said chairs are for the tired. I put the milk away and wiped a small ring from the counter with a towel until it faded. After drop-off, I stood by the wall planner and looked at the red circled date that had moved close by, doing nothing. I took a photo and set the phone down. The thin binder labeled Utilities lifted at one corner the way it always did. I slid a blank page beneath the plastic to flatten it and left it thicker than bills. I opened the drawer with the Archive B folder on my mind, felt the cool of the metal, and closed it again when footsteps sounded outside. The latch clicked softly. I set a clipboard on the table that showed only a single word, statement, then put a pen beside it and did not write. I opened the laptop, and a spreadsheet with initials and dates weighted like rails. I added 2 short lines. Playground whisper, rooftop toast. I kept the words dry so they would not burn when I needed to hold them. At work, the air vent hummed like a calm machine. I answered tickets and kept my replies clean. A colleague left a coffee near my keyboard and walked away without a word. I wrote a note of thanks I did not send yet. Ms. Ives asked for a quick follow-up and said the company preferred to minimize public drama. I said I had no plans for any show. She asked if I felt safe. I told her I was steady. She nodded and said to document anything that crossed from opinion into harm. I said I would. On the way back to my desk, the hallway printer fed out a single blank page, then stopped with a soft clunk. I took the page and placed it in my notebook behind the first 2. 3 blanks in a row looked like a bridge I could cross without noise. At lunch, I took the stairs and stood by the roof railing to let the wind empty my head. My phone buzzed with a reminder labeled Meeting, Personal. I dismissed it without reading details. A second ping followed with the softer tone of paper drop. I turned it off before the second note. I told myself the motion of my thumb was not postponement. It was choosing a stage with proper light. I walked back down and finished a network ticket that needed patience more than skill. In the late afternoon, I renamed one contact to a single emoji so the screen would not shout if it lit up. I moved a short, date-stamped audio note into Archive B and watched the progress bar fill and vanish. I picked up Iris from school, and we took the long path to the car, hopping from one square of sidewalk to the next. She asked if promises become lighter when shared. I said promises become lighter when kept. She said she wanted to keep one for me and asked if we could read 2 chapters tonight. I said we would try. She said trying counts if you do it honestly. I agreed and buckled her in. On the drive home, a bus rolled by with a big word across its side. More. I watched the letters pass and fade in the mirror, then looked at the road because the road needed my eyes. At home, I flipped the mail so the addresses faced the counter and set an unsealed envelope in the outbox where it had waited like a held breath. I placed 3 slender binders labeled Home, Auto, Bank in a neat row beneath the lamp. I set my phone face down and let the glass touch the wood. A muted call lit the screen as private and went dark again. I slid the thin USB from my pocket, felt its weight, and tucked it under the folded lip of the desk calendar. Out of sight, not gone. A CloudSync box blinked and said, File uploaded successfully. I closed it without checking the name. The apartment smelled faintly of warm plastic, that thin trace of printer toner that always makes night feel nearer. Mara arrived with a smile tuned for an audience. She said the live session would be at a rooftop cafe with a better view and a brand partner listening. I said public talk about our private life would not include our child's name or face. She said I was small. I said I was careful. She said careful is how dreams die. I said careful is how children sleep. Iris, from the table, asked if we were going to make cocoa later. I said yes. Mara laughed at something on her phone and walked to the bedroom. I opened the cupboard and brought down 2 mugs, then placed them on opposite counters again. Iris traced the rim of hers with a finger and asked if cups can be friends from far away. I said yes, if they keep their shape. When Iris was in pajamas, I read the first chapter and the second, then the first paragraph of the third, because waiting is easier when you have a small piece still warm in your hand. She closed her eyes with trust like a shade. I sat by the door and listened to her breathing until it lengthened into sleep. On the balcony, the plants whispered against each other like thin paper. The new key on my ring pressed my palm, cool and plain. I kept it there. Inside, I stood by the wall planner, looked at the red circle, and said aloud once in an even tone, "I will handle this properly." I did not say it again. Footsteps paused outside the door. The steps halted, the knob turned a fraction, the hallway quiet held its breath, and then the steps moved on while the printer in the hall spooled once and stopped, and the room settled around the sentence I had chosen. The city noon was bright enough to shine inside the office tower lobby and make the floor look like water. People crossed in easy lines to the security desk, showed badges, kept moving. The guard's scanner beeped at intervals like a calm metronome. I stood with my hands at my sides near the directory, eyes level, breath steady. I was early by a minute because early helps a heart behave. Rowan came through first with his phone already recording from his chest as if the world were a stage that had been waiting for him to appear. He looked at me, lifted his chin, and angled the lens. I did not speak. I did not shift. Jet stepped in from the revolving doors and glanced at the glass to catch his own reflection before looking at me. He took a place near a column where he could be in the picture without being in the center. Mara entered with that quick step people use when they expect applause. She wore a jacket that kept its own line and a brightness that asked the room to notice it. She saw me and smiled in a way that said she planned to win. She looked past me toward the elevator bank, then back at Rowan for a cue. He lifted his phone higher. The clock over the directory marked 12 pouces with a soft tone from the overhead speaker. The lobby sound dipped for a heartbeat and then returned. A professional voice behind my right shoulder said a clear set of words that the law requires. The voice was even. The words were exact. A licensed server I had not met before stood at the proper distance, confirmed Mara's full name, and held a folded packet so that the titles could be known without being waived. The server asked the confirming question, finished the sentence, and offered the packet. Mara's hand went out, as if pulled by a string she could not see. The paper touched her fingers and then rested there with its own calm weight. Rowan's phone tilted and then wobbled because his plan for a speech had no place to land. Jet shifted closer to the column's shadow. The guard watched with the stillness of a person trained to be a wall. The server summarized the immediate effect in small, plain words that carried more force than any caption. Temporary orders would hold the common areas in peace and set a basic possession rhythm so days could run without sharp corners. A clause set a clear limit on posts that used our daughter's image or name without both parents' consent. A conduct line addressed taunts and harassment wrapped as jokes. A status date was given in a clean voice. The packet did not sparkle. It did not perform. It simply existed the way a closed door exists, and solid, unafraid of weather. I kept my face quiet and my shoulders level. I did not gloat because gloating would make a mess of a room that had finally become neat. I did not flinch because flinching would teach the wrong lesson to the part of me that belongs to my daughter. I breathed once, slow, and let it out. The directory screen scrolled to a new list of tenants. The light on the floor shifted as a cloud moved past the glass. Mara looked down at the packet, and then up at me, and then down again, as if the paper might speak a friendlier language if she gave it time. Rowan lowered his phone and opened his mouth, but no words arrived. The lobby swallowed his sound and gave him his own breath back. A woman waiting for her badge reset glanced at us, and then looked away with that polite silence. Cities learn when they see private moments become public. The guard's scanner beeped again for someone else. Jet rubbed his thumb along his palm and studied the smooth stone tiles as though they held notes. A small child in a red hat tugged at a parent's sleeve and pointed at the revolving doors, fascinated not by us, but by the way glass can move while staying itself. The server stepped back the exact number of steps that the role requires, nodded once at the guard, and let the lobby return to its usual light. May stood a little way off near a planter, hands folded, eyes wet and steady. She did not come closer. She did not need to. She tilted her head the smallest distance, the way people nod to a pilot after turbulence ends and the seatbelt light goes quiet. I gave nothing back with my face except stillness. Delia came in from the street, saw Rowan, saw Myra, saw the packet, and stopped without choosing a side with her feet. The clock over the directory sounded its small second tone for the quarter hour. A soft announcement chime rose and settled in the air above us. The moment lay on the floor like a circle of sunlight that knows where it belongs. Rowan tried the old line about cruelty in public, but the room rejected it, because the room had eyes and ears and a scanner that beeps the same for everyone. Jet slid toward the doors, as if the building had changed shape and narrowed the lanes. Mara held the packet a little tighter and let her mouth open, then close, then open again. No words came. She looked at me as if I had stolen a trick from her pocket, but there was no trick here. There was only process, and process does not care about audience size. I thought about Iris asking if cups can be friends from far away, and felt how the two mugs on the counter were still doing their quiet work. I thought about the blank pages in my notebook and how they had held the space until this page with ink arrived. I thought about the sentence I had chosen, "I will handle this properly," and how it had built a bridge I could cross without raising my voice or lowering my eyes. I did not think about victory. I thought about steadiness. I thought about dinner at 7 and a chapter about ships and stars. The directory screen changed again. The guard nodded once in my direction, professional and human at the same time. The revolving doors turned and brought in a breeze that moved the edge of Mara's jacket. The packet remained, the weight of it unfamiliar but real. The room had given us the shape of the answer. It did not offer epilogues. It did not need them. Lobby announcement chime rings once more. The doors rotated behind her. She held the packet without a speech. The noon crowd flowed around the still point. The light reached the floor and stayed. Cut. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.